Hey friends, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another one of my crazy projects. As you can guess by the title of this, I am engine swapping the engine out of my Cadillac CTS. No, it's not a V, it's just a plain old CTS. That's a 2.8 liter V6 behind me. That is actually my old engine. I am doing this intro post engine swap, but I wanted to document it because I documented several steps along the way. I thought some of you guys might be interested in it. Some of you that are interested in doing this yourself, can you do it? And the simple answer to that is yes, you can do it, but there are just some things that you got to watch out for. So why am I swapping engines, and two, why am I just putting a 2.8 back in it? So I'll answer those questions. That is my engine behind me. That engine has a dead cylinder, well, sort of 1.5 dead cylinders in it. One produces almost no compression, the other one produced just a small amount of compression. So I'm operating on less than well, maybe a little more than 4 cylinders with that engine, and it was creating a problem. It had 195,000 miles on it. It was burning a lot of oil. I would go through probably 4 quarts between a 5,000 mile oil change, so used a lot of oil. So it was time. It was due to be refreshed. I was also having problems getting it started, which strangely enough appears to be related to the engine, because after I swapped engines, that new to me engine, actually it starts with no problem whatsoever. So it's really strange that swapping engines fixed that. I was going after battery, alternator, starter, all of those things, trying to figure out why it was dragging so hard and why it was being such a pain to start. But apparently the thing was just worn out. So anyway, that's why I'm doing the project, or have done the project. But what I wanted to do is I'm going to include some clips in here, mostly of the teardown of the car, stripping it apart, pulling cables and that kind of stuff. And you'll see my recaps. I usually did an intro for the day and a recap that night, just to kind of let you know what I had done. Most of the stuff, because I'm not tearing into the engine, was boring. It was unplugging wires. It was disconnecting exhaust, disconnecting cables, getting coolant and power steering fluid everywhere. For those of you environmentally conscious folks, yes, I cleaned it up, environmentally conscious, and took care of it. So, but just things like that, things that most people wouldn't want to see anyway. But I figured, just for the record, you might want to know that a backyard mechanic can do this. I will say this is not my first rodeo. This is engine swap number 6 in my lifetime. First time I've done one with this much electronics and sensors and all that kind of stuff on it. So anyway, that's why I'm doing it, and so enjoy the project. Okay, so I've introduced the project. What I didn't do is I didn't introduce day one and what my goals are. What you'll see right after this are some of my clips of documenting where the cables go, where some of the ground wires go, where various things are attached. So they might seem a little out of place. 1 or 2 of them I'm going to narrate, because I didn't do that during the project. So going into this project, obviously old, tired, worn out engine, I wanted to get it out. I had no idea how long this project was going to take me, so I kind of went into it blind. I was hoping that after an 8-hour day I could have the engine out. That just didn't work out. In the end, it took me probably about 11 or 12 hours to get the engine out. Yeah, probably 10 to 11. Let's say 10 to 11. And part of that is that I went into this I've never done one of these engine swaps before. I didn't know what it was going to take me to get out. I didn't know what I had to take off, what I didn't have to take off to get it loose. And as a result, I took a few more things loose than I needed to actually get it out. So that added up some of the time. If you've done this before, you have somebody that has done it before that can kind of guide you through the project, get you into it quickly. You can do it in 8 hours. I think you can do it in an 8 hour day. You can get the engine out. Yes, I took it out the top. I did not take it out the bottom, like some other YouTube videos will show you how to do. But I took it out the top. It's possible. And I'm going to show you some of the gotchas along the way. A couple of things that took a while was, number one, documentation, man. I can't stress this enough. Take pictures, take videos, see where the wires are, see where the harnesses route to. And once you get into it and you start tearing stuff apart, you're going to realize that, oh wait, I got to go back in there. For instance, the power steering cooling lines connect almost behind the passenger side engine mount. I didn't see them. When I went to pull the engine out, I actually started pulling them up, and then I realized, oh crap, I got to get those things disconnected, and I had to go back and disconnect them. Fluids, you got to just wait for them to drain. Sometimes you got to clean up. Hoses, cables, that kind of stuff. Like I said, document it, take photos, all that stuff. And I just have some notes in front of me. And part of the thing that took so long was just not knowing what I was actually getting into. So hopefully if you watch this video, you'll figure out some of the things that I learned the hard way, and this project will go a little quicker for you. So that said, you're going to see some clips of me documenting the cables and wiring harnesses, ground wires, that kind of stuff. Boring stuff, but just for your edification if you're about to take on one of these projects. All right, so here you go. Do a video walk around of all the cables and hoses. It's a good question. So this ground wire right here connects back to the engine block over here. If you can see that right there. Alright, so that I don't forget, all of this, especially that with the insulator, goes on the other side. That's the O2 sensor for the other side. It all routes back behind there. That bracket hooks on the back of that cylinder head over there. Just didn't want to forget that. And all of this stuff is a gigantic mess. And this one, just so that I didn't forget, I closed the one that goes on top on that controller. I plan to undo those little clippy harnesses there. You'll notice that there's a big one that's held underneath, and then two smaller ones with the red one on top. And they go back over toward the other side. My goal is to get this off. Day 2. So this is where I wish I had a gearhead friend to help me out with this. But let me show you where we're at. The Cadillac is kind of in pieces. Yes, the engine is still in there. I've got the AC out, the alternator's just loose, dangling there. Got all the wiring and exhaust free from this side. This side's a nightmare. I'm trying to get the exhaust free on this side. But as you can see, on the hood and stuff up there, got parts all over there. Got new to me engine here, and yeah. Whole bunch of nothing going on under there. So while you enjoy your Saturday, this is what I'm going to be doing. So there's a ground cable that I'm removing from right there that goes to this harness right here. What is that harness connected to? It's connected to the coils. Alright, day 2. I have no idea what time it is, but it's been a long one. But there is my win for the day. The engine is out. No more old, decrepit, 195,000 mile, 2.8 liter V6. Now we get to put in this little guy over here, which is supposedly a 60,000 mile, 2.8 liter V6. And see how that goes. So this is just sort of a post day 2 recap, or a post day 2 recap. The wiring in this car is just mind-boggling. There's so much of it, and it's just not a super accessible engine bay. I struggle getting stuff disconnected, getting wiring harnesses out. One of the hard things to do, getting the exhaust disconnected, is a challenge. So let me show you some of the things that I'm talking about. So as I said, this is my old engine, but it illustrates perfectly some of the things I'm talking about. This exhaust manifold doesn't have the heat shields on it. You can see the screw holes here where the heat shields bolt into. But particularly on the passenger side, you have this hot tube that comes out of the thermostat housing, comes around the side of the engine. That restricts that bolt hole down there. And it's tough to get to even with a U-joint. This one is a little bit easier because you can actually go toward the front, from the front of the engine toward the back, and get to it with a U-joint. A little bit easier. But nonetheless, when that heat shield is on it, you can't get it off of this manifold. You can't get it out either the front or the back until you get the catalytic converter piece off of it. Which really just kind of made it a nightmare. Here to show you what I'm talking about. This is the car, this is the side, but you can see down in here, you can see that heat shield, and you can see the front bolt that holds it on, and the bolts to the catalytic converter mount are just completely inaccessible with that on there. The driver's side, you have a little bit more room to work. This side, you're actually able to, once you get the bolts for the heat shield out, which are kind of a pain in the butt because one's down there, you've got this plug that has this insulator around it, and then the other one in the back, you can, yeah, it's reasonably easy to get out once you take this particular wiring block loose, which is connected to the block right back. I can't get a camera shot of it, right back there, I believe, if I can see in the camera properly. But if you loosen that bracket, you can get to that bolt pretty easily. That shield will slide out of the way, and it's pretty simple to get those out. But I mean, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff under here, and it just makes it a real challenge to get in and work with. So anyway, that's part of the reason, and I'm only talking about this post day 2 recap because you might ask, dude, how come you couldn't get this out in a day? And that's why I couldn't get it out in a day. So there you have it. Post day 2 recap. All right. I actually forgot to intro this earlier because I was just gonna sort of outline my plans for the day. But obviously behind me is the car and the 2 engines. Here, I'm gonna flip the camera around. Alright, so this is my old engine. I've been taking all the usable parts such as the motor mounts, alternator, other plugs and brackets off of this engine that need to go on that engine, and I'm nearly done. I'm just doing some final checks, and then I'm going to get under here, make sure that everything's set. Probably try to angle that transmission up a little bit more so that I can get these dowel pins lined up. So when you put these things in, they have holes and these little dowel pins right here. You have to, there's one on the transmission, one on the engine, and you just have to get them lined up when you put it in there. So I'm sure that will be somewhat of a challenge, but I'm up to the challenge and we'll get her done. And I will update later. All right, so wrapping up day 3. Just want to give you a recap on the project status. The new engine is in. The here, make it easier. The engine and transmission, flywheel bolts, all that good stuff, all bolted up. Got the alternator on, got the air conditioner on. So tomorrow's project is to sort all of that, wire it, and then I've got to plumb the exhaust from the exhaust manifolds down to the exhaust, which is hanging down there. So, oh, and we got to put the starter up too. But it's getting close, so stay tuned, and I'll give another update tomorrow. All right, so this is sort of it's a post day 3 recap. One of the things I wanted to show you, one of the things that makes this thing just super challenging, is it is on some of these bolts up here on the top, the bell housing bolts, particularly this one here and this one here. My camera keeps kind of going dark, so let's see if we can get a little closer. This bolt here and this bolt here are just a super challenge to get to because of this thermostat housing that is right here that goes here. I'm going to set this up here and hope that we have enough light to show you. But this thermostat housing literally sits right in here like that. Now this is the one that came off of the reman, or actually the junkyard motor that I bought. I didn't use it because this stovepipe fitting right here is actually bent and warped. But here's what I'm talking about. The housing on the thermostat. Hold on. So here's one of the things I wanted to show you. The housing on this thermostat almost completely covers and obstructs this particular bolt. What I ended up having to do, and it's a gigantic pain in the butt, is these 3 bolts right here, I had to loosen them on the thermostat housing. Once you get them free from the holes behind the thermostat housing, you can move this thermostat housing. So I was able to move this stovepipe out of the way, which I actually bolted back up, so it's not going to work very well in my illustration here. But you can move this up and you can get enough clearance so that you can actually get to this bolt. When it came time to put it back in, so I struggled with this particular bolt hole here from the top. I tried to take it out from the top. I got it out from the top, but it was hard as all get out. I'll not lie. One of the things that I did putting it back in is I got my wife to come help me. If you have an extra set of hands, it's perfect. I had her grab hold of these and actually pull this housing this way. And once she pulled it this way while I was putting it back in, I was able to get this bolt in pretty easily from the opposite side on the top. What was beautiful is that if you pull these tubes up, it'll actually, with the stovepipe out of the way, I should say, it'll actually get the stuff completely free of this bolt. And if you come up from the underneath, from this side on the underneath, you can get to this bolt hole very easily. You can get it in there, you can get it tightened up, and it's so much easier to get to from underneath. The trick is that these bolts on this thermostat housing are so long that you can't take them out. You cannot get them out between this and the firewall of the car. I have no idea why GM designed this way, this way, but you just can't take this piece off with the engine in the car. It's just not possible. So with that in mind, what I did is I was able to get the bolts free so that I could move this around. You can see that it's got a significant amount of play in here because it does have this particular fitting that goes in there. I was able to get enough play in there to get the bolts out. And then when I put it back in, I put a brand new gasket on it. I actually used my housing that came off of my old engine. But I put the gasket on this piece, put the bolts through it to hold the gasket in place. I spun one of these in just to kind of hold it while I set the engine into the car. And then once I got the engine in the car, I pulled it back out so that I could manipulate it to get to these particular bolts. So that's how you get to these bolts in the back. It's a super challenge. It's crazy, it's for the faint at heart. Most people would just give up. So one of the other things I wanted to talk about getting the engine in was the dowel pins. They were a little bit of a challenge, and I'll show you what I mean. So you have this pin here, which goes into the transmission and lines it up, and you have this pin here, which goes into the transmission and lines it up. The crazy thing about it is actually, if I remember right, and it's hard to see because it is bright outside, I think this is actually a bell housing. That is actually a bell housing bolt right there that goes in there. This is the one that gets completely obstructed by the stovepipes that come off of the thermostat housing. The kicker is that when I put the thing in, and you'll also notice that on the back of the flywheel, there's also a hole in the back of the flywheel. There's a pin, not really a pin, but a nodule that comes off of that protrudes from the torque converter that actually goes in that hole right here. One of the things that I found, and if you'll notice this one here, is exceedingly, for some reason it is exceedingly corroded. And the same was true of the pin that was on my car, or that was on the engine that I received from the junkyard. So I actually considered that, and I sanded it down, got it smooth, and I took a look at this one, and this one looks really good actually. It's nice and clean. And actually so was the one that was on the junkyard engine. So I just cleaned out the receiving hole on the transmission, sanded that one, cleaned the receiving hole on that one. But when I put the engine in the car, I could not get this side of the engine to mate up with transmission. So what I ended up doing was, when I found out that this was actually a bolt hole, that a bell housing bolt actually went through this hole, I made sure it was aligned. I had got a couple of bolt holes in the bottom just to hold it in there and to steady it. I got this one in there, and I got this one started. And then I got all of them started, and I started just kind of gently, in a motion around them, started just gently pulling them all together. And this one was, of course, the last one for me. It was the last one that wanted to go together, so I just kind of had to work this one, and I gently pulled it in. It pulled in, it lined up perfectly, but it proved to be a challenge. So that's some of the things that can be a gotcha in a project like this. For some reason, this pin over here, even though it was corroded, it went in just fine. This one, even though it was clean and looked great, it just didn't want to go in. So I just kind of pulled it together gently with the bell housing bolts. Again, I made sure I had the other ones in there. I had everything lined up. I knew that the torque converter pin was lined up and that we should be good. So that's how I got it back together. All right, so this is day 4 recap. I forgot to do an intro, but there's not a whole lot, wasn't a whole lot to talk about, so I'll show you kind of what I got done. All right. So I got the wiring harnesses draped over. Got the because I don't have those plugged up yet, but I had to put the wiring harness for the starter and the air conditioning compressor, all that good stuff down there. I got the coil packs on, wired. got the exhaust all buttoned up, including these annoying heat shields that take forever to get on and get situated, and then just some more general wiring and stuff put together. So we're getting there. Probably maybe 2 more hours, and we'll have her running. So stay tuned.
Go.
All right, day 5. I got 2.5 hours in this. It's buttoned up, and I'm ready to start it. So let's cross our fingers. Cross. Now what I'm going to do when I find the keys, there they are. I'm going to turn it on a couple of times just to let the injectors fill up, and then I'll crank it. Turn off. There we go. I want the lights off. One more time. There we go.
Dad, something's smoking.
It's smoking.
It's probably not a big deal, but
Okay. Well, I'm gonna step around people with
Almost.
what a grief.
She's struggling. Yay! Oh my God, it's running.
It's alive! It's not happy. It's saying that the engine power is reduced for some reason.
You want me to keep filming?
No, you're good.
Stop.
Yeah. So we're just gonna kind of keep an eye on this, make sure we don't have any leaks, and go back. So here's one of the things that I'm just going to say as I close this project out. Just to keep an eye out, if you're going to do a project like this and you're going to buy a junkyard motor, a couple of things just to watch out for. A few things that I ran into. A couple of them not because it was junkyard motor, just a couple of things that I ran into. So with that, let me show you a few things. So the particular company that I bought my engine from said that they were going to clean it and they were going to compression test it and do all that good stuff. A couple of things that I double checked when I got the engine is that I did pull the dipstick and I checked and there was no oil in it. The thing that I almost didn't do was check the torque on the oil pan bolt. My oil pan bolt on my junkyard engine was barely in. It would have come out and spilled oil all over the road had I not checked that. So check that. The other thing that, because they did a compression test, I know that they had to remove the coil packs. It's a 10mm screw. You pull that 10mm screw out, you pull the coil pack out, and then when you pull the coil pack out, you have access to the spark plug, and you pull the spark plug out. Now, so if you've never messed with one of these engines, let me show you something on mine. So this is, of course, my old engine, but one of the things that that I didn't think about doing as I was putting this thing back together is I know that they did a compression test on this, which means that they had to undo this 10mm bolt. They had to pull the coil pack out, and the coil pack sits on top of the spark plug. You see how far down in that hole that spark plug sits? I don't know if you can see it or not. I don't know if there's enough light. I can't really see it on the camera, but there is a spark plug down in there. So a couple of things that I found out. Because they had done a compression test, they didn't torque the spark plugs back in there. I had several loose spark plugs. As a result, I had on this side, on that side of the engine, the coil on the passenger side, but the number 6 coil actually was completely drowned in oil. That galley was so full of oil that it was spewing over the valve covers. It was making a mess. And when I took it apart to find out why, it's because the spark plug was not in there. So if you're getting a junkyard motor, and especially if they're taking it apart to do a compression test or something like that, make sure that that spark plugs are back in there, torque tight, and yeah, otherwise you will have a mess. Just as a reference, on my car, okay, so you see all the windshield wiper tray and all that stuff. All that stuff has got to come out. There's just no way to get to the back of this engine without taking that out. And as you can see, you can't even see back in there to where that thermostat housing is. You can see where you see right there behind that white label. Those are where it plugs into the firewall. So they go down and then over to where the thermostat housing is, which is behind this engine. So all that stuff has just got to come out. Otherwise, there's just no room to work in there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I should share with you. Just learned knowledge of a project like this. Oh yeah, coolant. There is only one way to put coolant in this engine. Now, one of the things that I did is I sort of did a little tricky kind of thing. I left my top rad hose off. It was the last thing I put on, just about. And so I actually put a funnel and a hose in here, and I actually filled up the radiator because I wanted the radiator to be full. I had read horror stories about these engines getting airlocked, not circulating water. So I wanted the radiator to be full. So I filled the radiator, put the hose on, and then went over to the reservoir, which is here, and filled it up. Now it sucked water down in there. It got or antifreeze down in there, and I thought that I had gotten it pretty close to being full. I honestly did not count the capacity that I put in there. So when I started the engine, I let it run for about 5 minutes or so. I let it come up to temperature, and I heard the fans come on. The radiator fans came on. I thought, you know, surely it's coming up to temperature. It's going to start drawing the coolant down, and it didn't yet. So I just continued to watch it for a while, but I only let it run for about 5 minutes, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to take it for just a quick drive down the street. Guys, I didn't get a quarter mile down the street when this thing went, hey, dude, I'm too hot. You need to shut me off. So right out of the gate, it's pretty easy to overheat these things if you're not careful. My advice is run them for a while. Run them for at least 10 minutes. Get in the car, elevate the RPMs, get it to pull. Sorry, it got dark again because I went in the garage. Get it to pull antifreeze out of that reservoir. Otherwise, you'll end up overheating the engine. It ended up taking... It took a while for it to draw it in and to completely fill the coolant system, but in the end, I got it filled, and it's working great. And one of the other things that I wanted to kind of point out, at the end of my final little vignette that I did, I mentioned that I had a problem getting it started, and it was because of the throttle position sensor. So the throttle position sensor is right here. I'm going to flip the camera real quick, okay? Alright, so the throttle position sensor is right here. You see that little yellow clip there? So that plug right there goes on that sensor from this direction. And I thought I got it in there. I thought it clipped in. But when I went to put the air box in, I had to wrestle the air box to get it on, and I twisted it a little bit to get it on. And then once I got it on, that's when we tried to start it. Well, unfortunately, I wiggled that wire loose, and you can't really even see the plug from this side, but I wiggled that plug loose, and so I had no throttle position, which is why it took so long to get the thing started. So there again, just make sure your connections are tight and you get everything in there good. Dude, I've mentioned that this is not my first rodeo. This is probably engine swap number 6 that I've done in my lifetime. By far the most complex one that I've ever done. But I don't do this every day. And so if I can do it, if you got any kind of mechanical knowledge whatsoever, you can do it. So there. Thanks for checking in. Thanks for watching the video. Thanks for just following with me through this project. So hopefully it's been entertaining. Hopefully it's been informative for you. And we'll see you on the next project. Okay? Later.